In this video, I'm gonna go over unit circle. So we're gonna go over how to find the coordinates of these points on the unit circle, and then we're gonna measure or we're gonna find the values of these angles. Okay, so first of all, let's write down the equation of a circle, which is x square plus y square is equal to r square, where r is the radius of a circle. In our situation over here, r is equal to 1. That's why we call it a unit circle. So we got x square plus y square is equal to 1. And then this whole circle makes an angle of 2 pi radians, or we can say 360 degrees. And to find these coordinates, we're going to use two methods. One of them is just a trick that you guys can memorize it easily. You can write down all the coordinates for the unit circle, which will help you to find the value of sine of that particular angle, or cosine or tangent, or whatever trigonometric functions value you want to find. Or we can find these coordinates using a mathematical formula. I'm gonna go over both of those. Okay, before that, let's go over the angles, how to write down the angles on a unit circle. So this is here 0, first of all 0 degree or 0 radian, and 1/4 of that over here is going to be 1/4 of 360 is 90 degree. I'm gonna write down in degrees first, and this point over here is 1/2 of 360 is going to be 180, and this one here is going to be 3/4 of this, which is going to be 270 degree, and this one is going to be 360, or if we start from here, then it's 0 degree. And now this point here is 0 radian if we are talking about radian, and this one is going to be pi over 2 radian, and this one here is going to be 2 pi over 2 radian, 2 pi over 2, which gives you pi, and this one here is going to be 3 pi over 2, and this one, when we complete a whole circle, is 4 pi over 2, which is basically 2 pi radians. Okay, and now let's find this middle point here, which is halfway between 0 and 90 degree, or 0 and pi over 2. So this point is basically 1/2 of pi over 2. So this is going to be pi over 4 radian. So this point here is pi over 4, and this one is going to be 2 pi over 4, which gives me pi over 2, and we already know that. And this one here is going to be 3 pi over 4, then this one is going to be 4 pi over 4, which is again equal to pi radian. Then we are on this point, which is 5 pi over 4. Then we are on this one, this gives me 6 pi over 4, which is basically again 3 pi over 2, and that's what we wrote. And then we got this point here, 7 pi over 4. Now back to this point, which we can say 8 pi over 4, again equal to 2 pi. Alright, now let's talk about here this point, which is 1/3 of this whole part, like 1/4 of a circle. Okay, so 1/4 of that is pi over 2, and we're gonna find 1/3 of pi over 2. So 1/3 of pi over 2 is going to be pi over 6. So this angle here is basically pi over 6, or 30 degree, because 1/3 of 90 degrees is 30 degree. So this is pi over 6. Now let's go back to the second. This is going to be 2 pi over 6, which is going to be pi over 3. So pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, and this one is going to be 3 pi over 6, which will again gives you pi over 2. And this one here is going to be 4 pi over 6, which is going to be 2 pi over 3. Now we are at here. This is 5 pi over 6. And now we are here. This is 6 pi over 6, which is again equal to pi. And this one here is going to be 7 pi over 6. This one here is going to be 8 pi over 6. And this one, if we are writing again, 9 pi over 6, which is going to be 3 pi over 2 again. So we are getting the same value. So 8 pi, 9 pi over 6, and this one is going to be 10 pi over 6. And this one is 11 pi over 6. The last one is 12 pi over 6, which is again equal to 2 pi. So that's how you can write all the angles. Okay, now question arises how to find the coordinates for these particular angles. Okay, so this side is our x and this is y. And so first of all, I'm gonna go over the trick to find the coordinates for all of these angles. Okay, so let's start with this quadrant 1. What you need to do for this point, the coordinates for this point here, I'm gonna write 1 over 2 and 1 over 2. Okay, same thing for this part, 1 over 2, 1 over 2, and then 1 over 2 and 1 over 2. Then what you need to do here is you need to write down, make this one, let me redo it. We're gonna leave, okay, let me rewrite it, sorry. So just put parentheses, just put 2 over 2 over 2, that'll be easy, then I don't have to erase and rewrite it again and again. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, 1, 2, 3, and then go in the backward direction, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and now we're gonna put square root on the numerator, square root here, square root here, square root, square root, square root, square root. Okay, so these are the coordinates in the first quadrant, and this can be rewritten as, if you want to, this can be root 2 over 2 can be written as a root 2, and 2 can be written as root 2 times a root 2. So this will cancel out, so 1 over root 2. So like this whole, these coordinates can be written as 1 over root 2 comma 1 over root 2. Okay, so these are the coordinates for these points, or the values of sine or cosine if you are looking for at these angles. Okay, so let's say if I am, and x value is your, x is basically cosine theta and your y is sine theta. For example, let's say for pi over 6, okay, how you can find the value of cosine at pi over 6. So what you need to do, cosine pi over 6. So when angle is pi over 6, what is the value of x? So root 3 over 2. Root 3 over 2. Easy. And now if I want to find the sine theta, like sine pi over 6. So sine pi over 6 is basically the y value of that coordinate at pi over 6, which is going to be 1 over 2. That's it, because root 1 is just 1. All right, so now on this side, when you move from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, the only thing that will change, the values stay the same. What you will be, the x values are going to be negative in this side. Okay, so instead of positive 1 over 2, it's going to be, for this point, whatever is this value correspond to this. So it's going to be negative 1 over 2 and positive root 3 over 2. And this is positive x value. Here it's going to be negative x value. It's going to be negative root 2 over 2, but y value stays positive in second quadrant. And for this point, 5 pi over 6, the same values but with a negative x value. So it's going to be negative root 3 over 2 comma 1 over 2. Okay, and when you are going in this side over here, or third quadrant, in third quadrant, you see whatever these values are, x is a negative, y is also negative, so you're gonna write those values. And when we are in fourth quadrant, you know, x is going to be positive, what y is going to be negative, so you can write all the quadrants over here just using these values. Okay, so just give me a, so we can write the values for the coordinates even in quadrant 3, or which is this one. So this value is going to be, if we go along this, so root 3 over 2. In third quadrant, x is a negative and y is also negative. So this coordinate is going to be, I'm going to write it over here. So negative 3 over 2 comma negative 1 over 2. And this one is going to be, if you go along this one, both x and y are negative, so which is again going to be negative root over 2 comma negative root 2 over 2. And this coordinate here is going to be, go over this value here, both are positive, go along this line over here, so it's going to be negative 1/2 and negative root 3 over 2. Same thing we're gonna write over here in fourth quadrant. If you go along this side, so here x is a negative and y is positive, but in fourth quadrant our x is positive, what y is negative. Then go to this point for this one, so x is going to be positive, what y is going to be negative. And for this point, you can go along this one here, so x is 1/2, what y is going to be negative root 3 over 2. So that's one way to write those. So using a trick, so you write over 2 over 2 over 2 for these three coordinates. You put 1 2 3 and then you go in a reverse direction, 1 2 and 3, and then you put square root on the numerator. So these three will give you the coordinates for first quadrant, and then you can write for second, third and fourth just by changing the signs. All right, so this is a trick. And now how we can find them using math? So we can calculate them using mathematical formula too. So let me go over that now. So gonna use the unit circle equation for that. Okay, I'll write this again. Okay, so look at the unit circle equation. X square plus y square is equal to 1. And when we are halfway here, that means x is equal to y there. That means x is equal to y. So if I plug in that in this equation, the circle equation, that gives me x square plus x square is equal to 1, which is 2x square is equal to 1, or x square is equal to 1/2. Therefore x is going to be 1 over root 2. Okay, so the x value is 1 over root 2, which is same, root 2 over 2. So this, let me rewrite this here. So this can be rewritten as 1 over root 2 comma 1 over root 2, as I wrote before. So you found x value, see, same as we wrote using a trick. But this is how you gonna find it mathematically. So plug in x back to your unit circle equation here, or we know x is equal to y, so y is also going to be 1 over root 2. So x and y is basically 1 over root 2 comma 1 over root 2 when angle is pi over 4. Okay, and now let's find the other two values. Okay, and here we're gonna use those special right angle triangles. Okay, so let's go over this point first of all. So this angle is 30 degree, and if I draw a perpendicular on positive x-axis over here, so this is 90, this is 30, so this is 60 degree. So if I write a special right angle triangle, if you guys remember, so 30, let me make it a little bigger. So 30 degree, 60, 90. So special 30, 60, 90 is basically the value of your hypotenuse. If this is 1, the hypotenuse is 2, and then this side is going to be root 3. In our case, this side is, our radius is basically 1. Okay, here we use radius is equal to 2. So our hypotenuse in this equation is 1. Okay, so that means the values are going to be 1/2 of these values. So for our equation, it is going to be 1/2 of this, 1/2 of this, and 1/2 of this. So this gives me the x value. You see the x value, which is the length of this length over here. The x value is root 3 over 2, which is root 3 over 2, and the y value, which is this perpendicular, 1/2, and that's what we found using a trick. See, you can find the coordinates for this point using mathematical equation and this special right angle triangle. Okay, this is the same value here. How about this point? Same thing, it's again a special triangle. Let me make some space here and write that down. I'm gonna write that over here. So now we are here. So this angle is going to be this one, which is basically 60 degree. And if I draw a perpendicular on a positive x-axis here, this is going to be 30 degree. So this is going to be opposite value as we found for 30, 60, 90, this equation. So here, let me write it down here so you can see. Okay, now we got, this is 60, right, and this is going to be 30, and this is 90, and hypotenuse is again, this was 2, along 30 and 90, is root 3, and along 60 and 90, sorry, root 3 is going to be 1. But in our case, our this side is 1, which is just the radius of a circle, so we need to divide it by 2, divide it by 2, divide it by 2. Now see, this length over here, this length is basically this length, which is x value, and which is 1/2. So x value is going to be 1/2, and this vertical length is root 3 over 2, gives you the y value, which is this dotted line over here. So your x is 1/2 and y is root 3 over 2, and that's what we found using the trick, 1/2 root 3 over 2. See, that's how you can find these coordinates even using mathematics. You don't have to memorize the trick. So it's up to you which one makes sense to you or which one you think is easier. Either using a trick, write them down, or just use a math to prove it. All right, and then to write the values of these coordinate over here, this is just changing the signs. When you go to second quadrant, x is a negative, y is positive, and third quadrant both are negative. In fourth quadrant, x is positive and y is negative, so you can write them correspondingly. Okay, so that was how you can find the coordinates. Now let's find the values of sines and cosines. Okay, so let's make some space over here. Okay, so we know x side is equal to cosine of the theta and y is sine theta. So if they ask you what is the value of cosine when angle is pi over 4, so that means cosine pi over 4 is equal to just the x coordinate value, which is here 1 over root 2. How about sine pi over 4? So sine pi over 4 is, sine is the y value of that coordinate. So for pi over 4, the y value is 1 over root 2. How about 90 degree? Okay, cosine 90 or pi over 2 is going to be x coordinate, which is 0. So cosine 90 is 0. How about sine 90? Sine is a y coordinate, which is 1. There you go. So how you can find, that's the way you can find the value of sine and cosine for all those angles. Now let's say if they ask you to find tangent pi over 4. See, tangent pi over 4. And we know tangent is sine over cosine, right? So sine pi over 4, cosine pi over 4. Sine pi over 4 is 1 over root 2 and cosine pi over 4 is 1 over root 2. So that gives you 1. So tangent pi over 4 is just 1. How about cotangent? Then you just write the reciprocal of it, which is again 1. All right. And same thing, you can find all those angles like 4 pi over 6 or 2 pi over sine of 2 pi over 3 if they ask you. Let's write that down too. Okay. How about sine of 2 pi over 3? And sine is y value. So 2 pi over 3 is this angle over here. So this angle, I see 2 pi over 3. So this point, what is the y value? Root 3 over 2. There you go. How about cosine 2 pi over 3? So 2 pi over 3 is here. Cosine x coordinate is negative 1/2. There you go. Okay. And my other video, the previous video, I also made a video on how to find the signs of trigonometric functions in all quadrants. So you can use, remember, first quadrant is all or after school to college. That means all positive, sine and its reciprocal is positive, everything is negative. That's why sine is positive, but cosine is negative half or negative half. And here tangent is positive and its reciprocal. Here cosine is positive and its reciprocal is positive. Everything else gives you the negative values. So that was all about the unit circle, writing down the angles and writing down the coordinates using two different methods, a trick and finding them using some mathematical equations. Thanks for watching the video, guys, and please do share with your friends or others, and please subscribe, because that keeps me going and that motivates me to make more videos. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.